Karin, thank you for accepting the invitation again to be one of the speakers at the Childhood Potential Conference. I'm really glad that you are here.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate having the opportunity.
Karin, I will say a few words about you. I hope you can add something that I forget or if I say something wrong. Karin, you have your AMI diploma for 0 to 3. You have a master's degree in education. In 2012, you studied with Grazia Honegger Fresco in the last course that she offered for 0 to 3. You moved to Italy to create a Montessori course for public healthcare and nurse midwives. Your work gives the continuity to the teachings on birth to three that Costagnochi and Montessori passed on through Honegger Fresco. And you continue to work on projects in Italy with direct students of Adele Costagnochi, and you specialize in the care of the newborn. What did I forget? What do you want to add? Where do you want to invite us? Tell us about your courses. And please feel free to add anything to your story that you feel is important.
Thank you for that introduction, Lucy. This conference that you have organized, these conferences you've organized, are allowing so many people access to the wisdom of Maria Montessori. So I'm so grateful for you and your team and all you do. I think this is the third time that you've invited me to be part of you. It's been quite a journey from for me from 2010, which is when I began, or 2009 was when I began this this independent research journey. Because from my AMI training, from my AMI diploma course, it left me with a lot of questions. And so I had this inner need to go to Rome and find the source. Makes my work unique is that I have the AMI diploma and I have the understanding of all that that is, which is an incredibly beautiful Montessori training to have. The work of the AMI and what they've done with Dr. Montanaro and everyone that's come since. But what makes my research unique is before Montanaro brought that to the AMI, which was in the early 1980s, there was Grazia Honegger Fresco, who had been with Adele Costagnochi since 1949. And so since 2010, which was my first research trip to Italy, so 15 years now, I've been on this quest. I don't know if this is religiously appropriate, but I used to call it the quest for the Holy Grail of 0 to 3 Montessori, because I really just wanted to understand inside and out what was it about, where it came from. And Grazia's work truly adds a unique flavor that is so important. So that's, in a sense, my mission is to bring Grazia's work into the Montessori 0 to 3 movement. The courses I've developed over the last 4 years are the basic needs of babies. And it sounds like we're studying babies, and we are, but basically we're studying what the basic needs of humans, of the human mammal, because we all have the same basic needs. And that basically summarizes everything that I'm going to talk about today, which is, when you relate to a newborn, even in utero, when you relate to a person that's in front of you, how do you do that? How do you do that so that the person really feels seen and understood, and that their communications are worth something? Because you're not just saying, well, my newborn's crying, and newborns cry because they're newborns, but you're like, what is that communication, and learning that language. So the Basic Needs of Babies online course is basically the inner development, the spiritual development, the growing new eyes so that you see people differently and you see relationships differently. People come to it and say, I thought I was going to learn about babies, but I really learned about myself. And that's what's been so significant. I co-create that course with Ruth Earhart of True Midwifery, and she is a home birth midwife. She's traditionally certified in South Africa, and she's also a professional midwife certified in the United States. So, and she's a Montessori mom and a Montessori child. So she's able to bring Montessori midwifery to to a different level, as we know from her past talks at the conference. And so we offer that online through the Teachable platform in two versions. One's a self-study, so you can just sign up and uh, you get into a prepared environment. So it's a Montessori course for adults. And the other one we accompany you through with workshops that meets about once a month. And the group, and it's always a small group, is able to grow and learn together and reflect together on the materials. And then something that I've been dreaming about for years, but COVID made things delayed, is offering newborn work here in Italy. And I'm developing a retreat center where I live, so I'll be able to host small courses. And we actually had our first little prototype in June here in Italy in the Maiella National Park. Um, and this June, well, June 30th to July 7th, I'm going to organize a retreat. So I'm calling it a newborn retreat. And it'll be a week in a beautiful Franciscan retreat center. And it's an application course. So we'll be able to put the link on the website so people can apply to attend that
Mhm.
if they are interested.
Perfect, thank you. You talked about Gracia. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about her so we introduce her for those who don't know her?
Yeah, so Grazia Fresco, that was her maiden name. She was born in Rome, and she lived there until she'd met her husband, and they moved up to a small town called Castellanza, which is 30 minutes outside of Milano. So she, like Maria Montessori, grew up in the center of Rome. Her house and Adele Costagnocchi's house were a block away. You know, the river, the Colosseum, you know, the all of that, the Pantheon. She lived in the essence of the eternal city of Rome. And her mother had been a Della Costagnocchi's student as well as a teenager, because her mother, I believe she actually lived in what was a boarding school, orphanage boarding school that these sisters developed right next to Piazza del Popolo. So that's that huge circular piazza. And Costagnochi did the Montessori training in 1909, the very, very first one. Um, but then she got her other degrees to become a teacher, and her day job, I like to call it, her Montessori work was kind of her night job. But she did two shifts, but her day job was teaching in this boarding school that also took students from the general community in Rome. And so people actually sent their daughters. It was a girls' school, preparation for becoming teachers. So she taught pedagogy and philosophy and history. And Grazia's mother was one of her students in that time. So truly, Grazia, in a sense, was born into the Montessori movement, born into Costagnocchi's part of the Montessori movement. And she was an incredibly intelligent woman, and in her day she was expected to go to university and to continue this kind of new woman in 19 she was born in 1929, so it's no 1946 1947, post-war. The women in Italy were just about to get the vote, very late in the game, but finally, even though Montessori was fighting for that, around 1903. So Adele Costagnocchi basically handpicked her and said, "You will come do the very first assistance to infancy work." It wasn't called the training; it was called the school, the Assistance to Infancy Montessori School, so the AIM school. And everyone thought, well, no, you should go to university. You should follow the path of an intelligent woman at this age. And so she actually, I don't think she ever did a university degree. She was completely self-taught through Adela Costagnocchi's Assistance Infancy School. And she was focused on 0 to 3 Montessori from 1947 until the day she died in 2020. So truly a one of a kind Montessori mentor for us. And what she has to say is really important. And she's written 20, 30 books, and she's written 500 articles, and she's curated 200, 300 journals. So she has all of this material that is at this point still basically in Italian. And it's important for me to find the channels, the publishers who would like to help translate and publish this work.
Hmm. Perfect. You wanted to show a video about her. Is this the right time?
Well, so it's not a video about her.
Mm-hmm.
It is a video with her narrating.
Okay.
So she's going to be talking to us, and I have done some translating for what she's saying in the subtitles.
Relazioni sicure. Io direi relazioni amorevoli, per dire che danno sicurezza. È questa attenzione senza e non prevaricante sul bambino. Protettiva, ma che apre all'indipendenza, perché il bambino ha bisogno di protezione e la protezione gli viene dalla stabilità, dalle cose che tornano, il periodo sensitivo dell'ordine, perché a quello è sensibilissimo il bambino, questo non c'è dubbio che è così.
Yeah, this piece of narration by Grazia is she's talking about how important this secure relationship is, how important it is for a newborn to understand. Okay, so we often think about animals, dogs and cats, as like they have to understand the world through the rhythm that they feel in their bodies because they don't have the ability to know a clock says, it's only 2:30, this and that. And so that's what the sensitive period of order is. Grazia would call it the sensitive period of orientation. Order is a kind of a funny word, but she would call it the compass, that inner compass that allows the baby to orient and feel safe and secure. So the innermost sensation of the baby is basically just boils down to two things: it's, fear or it's love, it's safety, security. And so this sensitive period for order, well, what does that mean for a newborn? Another thing Grazia would say is, a newborn is not a suitcase. So we think a newborn is so easy just to take anywhere and give to anybody to take care of, because if they've got a bottle to feed them, the mother is basically able to take a baby anywhere and hand a baby over to anybody, but that's a baby as a person who doesn't have a sensitive period of order. So once you really realize how important the sensitive period of order is, you realize how much like animals we are at birth. A baby seal finds its mother on a beach full of seals. The elephant seal rookeries, there's hundreds and hundreds of baby seals and mother seals. And they have to find their mother through smell. And so if a newborn, a human newborn, is in the arms of someone else who isn't their mother, they're basically hanging out with the wrong smell. And that is one of the most important senses for a baby to feel safe. And then what happens if a baby's need for order isn't met? There's basically kind of a contraction, a closing down. You can take refuge in sleep so easily, just close your eyes and disappear. And that's kind of the beginning of a pattern of disassociation from reality. And so it's so important that, babies need to sleep as much as they need to sleep, but they don't need to sleep all the time. And if they're in an environment that allows them to do the opposite, to expand out into that, explore that environment, a snail, imagine that. The course I took with Grazia, the little image on our little pamphlet for it was a snail. Not only because growth is so slow, that human infancy growth is so slow, and we have to be so slow and patient to accompany that child, but also that idea that a snail is so sensitive to the outside world. And you disturb that little snail and they disappear inside. And that's what happens to our newborns, is they basically spend all that time inside their shell, protecting themselves from overstimulation or what isn't right for them. And that's what the sensitive period of order is about, is recognizing that we have to give them what's right for them according to what they feel is right for them, not what's convenient for the adult. And that's a really difficult balance, because the adult having a new baby has to change so many rhythms. But it's a beautiful investment, because that child finding trust at the beginning, feeling safe enough to outwardly expand, is going to be a different child than the one who's spent a lot of time being closed and being afraid.
That makes sense. You actually already started to talk with the sensitive period for order about some needs that the newborns have. Do you want to go on with this topic? Like, what are other basic needs of the newborns?
Yeah, that's such a simple question to ask, in the sense that all the newborn really needs is his or her mother. But what does that look like? Nils Bergman is a doctor and researcher in skin to skin, the benefits of skin to skin right after birth, or for low birth weight, or for premature babies. And he uses this term zero separation. And babies born in hospitals rarely get zero separation. And yet almost every medical procedure can happen without separation. So there's this way that we separate babies from mothers at birth. The cord gets cut, of course, but there's absolutely no need for that baby to be taken away from the mother. At least that skin to skin on her chest is the moving the baby from the uterus to the external womb, because everything's still the same. You still hear her heartbeat, you still smell her smell, you still smell the colostrum in the breast is smelling a lot like amniotic fluid. So everything's just right. As soon as you take that baby off the skin of the mother, you have removed this baby from his environment, and he or she is going to begin to go through stress responses, which are bad for health, like bad numbers on the charts, bad, it causes problems. And so the medical institutions are actually creating a scenario that is less healthy for this baby, when they can actually do everything to this baby while he's on the chest of the mother, on the tummy of the mother. So zero separation is the fundamental basic need of that newborn. Another one that Adela Kostanyoki talked about was the need for total rest. So again, think of that newborn who's just come into the world, and how much are they being given the opportunity to rest? Very little. They're actually being stimulated, taken here and there, tested this way, these things getting added to their, because the protocols are do it now, but it doesn't have to happen now. But then we check it off the list. I know that. I like to get things done. But it's the same thing. It's not based on the need of that baby to have some substance in their eye. And now they can't even see their mother, and they've just been born. And that is the bonding mechanism. And you've put stuff in their eyes now, today, in this moment, as opposed to waiting. And they're so exhausted. They just spent, what, 3, 4 hours to 24 hours, in this incredible experience that was nothing they've lived, a whole day worth of this after peace of being inside a watery aquatic, so complete rest. How do you do that? Well, you have to keep all the stimulus down. Basically no sounds if possible, except for the mother's voice if possible. The lights, so that you're not, that's another way they close down, is the room is too bright. I don't know if you've ever been so sleepy, you didn't get good sleep at night, and the sunlight just really hurts, and you have to wear sunglasses or squint. It's like that for the baby coming into the world. Like, they can't open their eyes when there's too much light. So reducing the light, shadowy light, a lamp in the corner, so there's enough light for us to see by, but that's it. That's another really fundamental need. But do we think about that? We think about what we need. We need light so we can see everything. The colostrum is so important. The colostrum is present in the 2 to 3 days before milk comes in. Milk is a different biochemical substance. Colostrum is like the multivitamins, and the milk is like the pasta. In racehorses, if they don't get their mother's colostrum, they will never be a racehorse. Like, they basically can't run as fast. Colostrum is this fundamental milk product that has, and there's research on it, but again, we make it really hard for the mother to necessarily offer that colostrum in the beginning through separation. The transition into the world is so important that it goes slowly. Anything that's new for us, we have to do slowly in order to feel good about it. So this transition from being a aquatic mammal, floating in water, like, how different is gravity? How different is light and sound? And how different is 50 members of your family coming to see you, wanting to hold you? So the transition period really needs to go slow. So protecting that environment from all stimulus as possible, and really reading the signs of the baby. When he has an alert awake period, that's a moment to take in the world, and starting with only mother's face and the partner's face, the father or the partner. If there's someone like a grandmother who's literally living in the house, if extended members of the family are part of that really tight nucleus, they too are in that sphere. But if not, then they can wait. Really, they can wait. It's hard. It's really hard to wait to meet or to spend time with this new being. But whose needs are you meeting? You have to measure your decisions. No one's telling you what to do. It really has to come from within. Like, I want what's best for this person, this baby. So I'm going to wait 2 weeks, to go and be part of what he's absorbing as his stimulus, because he has to be capable of absorbing you. Otherwise, it was more of a stress than it was a pleasure. The mother's instincts are so important, right? Because that is what protects a baby. A baby mammal needs the mother's instincts to protect him. Oftentimes, instincts have been kind of put under the rug because we defer to whatever the medical wisdom is, or what other people tell us. Everyone else has had a baby and they tell you what they know, as opposed to protecting yourself as a new mother from all of that and really going within. Because even if we've had our instincts kind of, suppressed, we can always find them again, because we're mammals. So they're in there, they're in our genes. And the mother's instincts are so, so important, so, so important. And then really committing to learning the communications, the cries, but not just the cries. And there's cries for hunger, and there's cries for my diapers wet, and there's cries for all the physical things, but there's also cries for, I'm really uncomfortable in this position. I can't move myself. Can you shift me? There's cries for, I'm afraid of what's going on, or I'm frustrated because I've been crying and you don't understand me. So now I'm screaming my head off in frustration. There's lots of levels of cries that mean so many things, not just physical, but psychological. But then there's also all of the behaviors. Like a person with dementia has behaviors, or a 2-year-old has behaviors that are a communication. A tantrum is a communication of something that's wrong for their needs. A 2-year-old's tantrum. A person with dementia has tantrums. Something is totally wrong for them and they basically lose it. Their behavior goes south. A newborn has the same thing. Their autonomic nervous system behaviors. And so they do things like turn away from a stimulus so they don't see it. They get hiccups. They have all these reflex reactions. And all of those are signs of something they need that they're telling us through body communications. And so we have to learn that language. That's really important, to not just think the cries for hunger or for tiredness is all that they're telling us. They're telling us so much more. And like any other language, like if you started talking to me in your language, I would have no idea what you were saying to me. You're my newborn, speaking a newborn language. So it would take time. So mothers can be really patient with it. I don't understand yet, but I'm seeking to understand. And then the last thing is that at some point, and who knows when, because every person is different, at some point they're ready. They're ready for discovery. They're ready for exploration. They're ready for new things. And so the environment at that point really needs to be prepared so that they can grow. Their intellect, the curiosity is fed. It's like food. You have to feed the body and the spirit. And so you can't just keep them in a dark, quiet, strapped up in a, I don't even remember what they're called. In Italy, they don't swaddle anymore. In America, you swaddle and swaddle and swaddle and swaddle, and it helps them sleep better. But they don't need to be swaddled. And a swaddle is like an environment without stimulus. You're preventing the spontaneous movements to develop into movement progressions that become how we end up on our feet at the age of 12 months or whatever it is. So that's a crescendo that we have to be ready for, but we also have to what's the word, facilitate or manage the environment so that it's a very gradual crescendo.
Thank you. You wanted to show a video about the power of connection. Do you want me to show it now?
Yes, let me introduce it first. So this is a little tiny excerpt from a TED Talk, and Hedy is a counselor who works with adults, couples, and she works in the field of relationship. And so everything we've been talking about so far, and before we launch into the how to meet the basic needs of the newborn and the new mother, I wanted to show this as a way to kind of create curiosity about what if we were talking about the newborn listening to this.
Perfect, let me play it.
This miracle with my mother illustrates the 3 invisible connectors that I want to talk to you about today. It is the relational space, the space. It is the bridge between the worlds, the bridge. And it is the encounter, human essence to human essence, the encounter. These 3 invisible connectors, you know them. You live them. But you may never have framed them that way. And let me start by talking to you about the space. It is the Jewish philosopher Martin Buber who said, our relationship
lives in the space between us. It doesn't live in me or in you or even in the dialogue between the two of us. It lives in the space that we live together. And he said that space is sacred space. What shall we do? How do we take responsibility for the space between us, which is sacred, as says Martin Buber? Here comes the metaphor of the bridge. We take responsibility for the space between us by crossing the bridge to the world of the other and bringing our full presence on the other side. All you take with you across the bridge is a little plastic bag, transparent, with a passport and a visa. The reason it needs to be transparent, you cannot bring anything of yours to the other side of the bridge. And when you've landed on the other side, what do? You listen. You listen with an open heart. You listen with new eyes. It is Marcel Proust, the French writer, who said, "The adventure of life is not about discovering new landscape. The adventure of life is seeing the old ones with new eyes." And you bring your new eyes and your open heart and your generosity of spirit, and you listen as if you're learning a new language, a new music, a new rhythm. You listen by repeating the words. I hear you say, "Have I got you?" And you learn about the landscape in this other world. And so what can happen on the other side? And what happens on the other side is the encounter. Now, what is the encounter? On a biological level, the encounter is the resonance between two brains. The relational neurobiologists call this resonance the brain bridge. Two limbic systems that resonate together. The seat of our emotions beginning to resonate together. And relational neurobiologists have found that when there is this resonance between two brains, our central nervous system begins to calm down. Because they've also discovered that our brain is the only organ inside of us that doesn't regulate from within. It regulates on the outside through another brain. We need each other for self-regulation. We can only regulate through the other, through the eyes of the other, through that resonance. And what happens? But in another domain, it is harder to define what the encounter is. It is the meeting of two full human presences, or two human essences, or the life force in each person, or the meeting of two souls. And what is that life force? What is the human essence?
What did you think of that video? Have you seen Hedy before?
I didn't see her before, and it was really nice to hear. And it was really nice when I was concentrating on what she was saying, as in the relationship part, how we can connect it with the newborn. And it's true that you can actually hear a completely different TED Talk.
Yeah, I'm including a link to the whole TED Talk in the area for this presentation. And at the very end, she concludes with extending that relationship nation to nation. So she turns that into world peace, like Montessori and her education and peace idea was we have to educate for peace. And Hedy is telling us how how to educate for peace. You, from the very beginning of life, and she's not saying this, I'm saying it, but she's talking about parents. Well, she's talking about adult couples and how to create, how to end the war between, the relational war, which is I'm on my side of the bridge and you're on your side of the bridge. I don't really understand you. I have all my baggage, all my conditioning from my past. I get angry because you do this, you do that, as opposed to what she's describing, where you leave it all behind, you cross the bridge, you observe, you listen, and you create something that's very sacred, that's a relationship.
Mhm.
If we were all taught relationships to be like this, we'd have no more violence, domestic violence. Montessori talked about the struggle between the adult and the child. So we are looking at the level of peace on the individual level between two people. And that begins at birth. So let's go back to this idea that you have a newborn who cries all the time. Why are they crying? Well, because they're a newborn. That's what newborns do. You have basically invalidated everything that crying is saying by not recognizing it as an intelligent communication. So if we listen to this TED Talk from the perspective of, well, what about me as a new mom and my newborn, and I'm building a relationship with this person, we have to be very patient because it's, again, learning a new language. Like she said, it's developing these new eyes to see. And that was something that Grazia would always say. You have to develop new eyes because one person can be looking at something and another person can be looking at the same thing. And as a Montessori trained perspective, we see it differently. We see it from the child's perspective, as opposed to a naughty child who's making a fuss. We see it as a responsive behavior to an unfair condition and the environment that's not adapted to that person's development and growth. So I thought I wanted to share that video here as a way to kind of launch into the heart of the interview, which we're getting to now, and how important it is, to basically see it as a relationship that is a two-way. So you are caring for this being, but this being is not a passive object. This being is actually telling you what they need.
Mhm. So, how can you prepare and welcome for this fragile human being?
Yeah. One of the very first articles I translated, and this was, I think back in 2008, Grazia curated a journal, a Montessori journal called the Quaderno Montessori, which means notebook. So the Montessori notebook. And it was 0 to 12 or 0 to 18 or whatever, it was everything. It was Montessori, but a lot of articles about the newborn and the 0 to 3 phase. And today this is available online digitally for free to everybody. It's all in Italian. But with translation technologies today, even without getting it all translated, people should be able to access stuff. And we can also put that link to Grazia Hoeniger Fresco's personal site for the Quaderno Montessori. So it was called, this article that I was referring to was called Greeting the Newborn, Accogliere il Neonato. And it's basically everything we talked about when we listed the basic needs. Greeting the newborn means allowing this transitional period. And the newborn period can be a month, 6 weeks, pediatric language, I think medically speaking, it's like 28 days. But in a Montessori way, through observation, you will know when the newborn phase is over for your baby in front of you. Because something has changed. There is a new ability to be in the world, absorb stimulus, want to know more, and you're not just in that bubble phase of what country have I ended up in? What planet am I on? When I was 17, I went to France for a year as an exchange student, and I had a knot in my stomach for 2 weeks. Our well-being and our digestive system are very interrelated. And for me, that experience of being in a brand new culture, in a language I'd studied in high school, but I'd never lived in, and everything that was new that I had to adapt to created in me an anxiety level that turned my stomach into a knot. So, colic, we think, oh, this baby isn't digesting the milk right. And, there's bubbles and there's gas. But it's really going back to that need for order, orientation, stability, security, a sense of safety. And so that newborn phase is really when that ends and this person has arrived, kind of psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, I'm ready. I'm ready to be here. And that's when the welcoming of the newborn, if you're very careful to do it based on what you can understand through the direct communications as his or her needs for low stimulus, to be with the mother and nobody else for as much of the time as possible in that early phase. Everything we've talked about already. But you really need very little. You really need very little. You don't need a movement mat. You're not going to be putting that newborn down on a movement mat. That newborn ideally is on the mother or in a cestina, which you can see behind me, next to the mother, within the mother's energetic field, because the baby, the newborn, it's a strange thing, but we have electromagnetic fields, right? And so the baby and the mother have lived in one. And so as soon as the baby is outside of the mother's electromagnetic field, that's usually when they start crying. So putting a baby somewhere else to sleep. So the cestina is this beautiful way to greet the newborn and provide for that need to be close to the mother, because it's on wheels and it can be with you in the kitchen while you're chopping. It can be, try not to have too many onions sauteing. That's a pretty intense odor, but you get the idea.
Montessori talked about the spiritual embryo. Do you want to tell us something about what it actually is and how can we protect the spiritual embryo that she's talking about?
So it's an embryo, so it's in development. The embryo is the first 2 months in utero, and then you become a fetus. So it's really, she's talking about, and an embryo is when the organs get built, when the arms and the legs get built. It's when you build the capacity. So the spiritual embryo is, and I don't even really know. I'm sure she says it somewhere. Like, is it from this day to that day? Is it from this year, birth to this year, 3 years? I like to think that it's different for everybody. And as Dr. Montanaro would talk about, we'd go through these developmental crises. I would almost like to propose that some of us, and even perhaps myself, my spiritual embryo is actually still an embryo, because until you really develop all this capacity to live your cosmic task, like you aren't conditioned, you aren't afraid, you're in an expansion. Like when you started this project, your capacity and your potential was on a trajectory that was your cosmic task. And so who knows how old we are when our spiritual embryo becomes a spiritual fetus. And then when our spirituality, our spirit, and again, not in a religious sense. I mean, in a religious sense, yes, because in any religion, it's the same thing. The spirit is the essence of who we are and our cosmic task, what we're to bring to this world, the gift that we give. But what does it mean to protect it? So the uterus protected the physical embryo, and it had to. You couldn't develop arms and legs and a beating heart. I mean, you can. They do it in a test tube now. I just saw a movie that was based on the history of the woman and the two professors. The woman was a nurse, just a nurse, but she was like the driving force in the end about this test tube technology, which has, revolutionized. Yes, so your spiritual embryo can happen outside a womb, but you still have a womb. You still have well, no, you get put back in. Sorry, I'm getting a little confused here. You get put right back in that womb, right? After fertilization. So anyway, the womb for the spiritual embryo what is that? Because that is obviously what is going to protect the spiritual embryo while it develops all of its pieces and parts. It's the environment. It's nothing but the environment. And what's the environment for a newborn? It's the world that he has to live in now that he's no longer in a womb. Before the environment was limited. Now the environment is not limited. So to protect the spiritual embryo, the adult needs to limit the environment. And as everything we've said before, recognize when it's time to augment, recognize when it's time to go out, recognize when it's time to introduce new faces, new arms with new smells, and judge very carefully based on what your perception is of whether this baby feels safe or whether this baby feels fear. And as we've talked about, all the signs that we can read from behavior, what looks like beautiful deep sleep can actually be refuge, taking refuge. Yeah, so it's the most important thing I think that humanity can address is protecting a spiritual embryo.
This developing human being begin to learn?
Wow. So we begin to learn in utero. We obviously do. When I was in my AMI training course with Dr. Montanaro, she talked about organic cellular memory. So basically, we're learning from conception. Obviously, at conception in the weeks prior or post, in the weeks, well, maybe prior to, because preconception, there's some spiritual beliefs that, there's a lot formulating to happen, but we won't go into that. I'm sure Montessori thought about all that with her Theosophical Society interests. And, she was so metaphysical in many ways, and also very Catholic and very religious in a very precise way as well. So it's hard to talk outside of religious when we're talking Montessori, even though so much of Montessori has become non-religious. So the weeks after fertilization, you're just blobs of cells. So you're not actually creating cellular memory in that's a conditioned response. Or what is learning? Well, at the beginning, learning is like Pavlov discovered. It's conditioned response to stimulus. What is intellectual learning? That's Lev Vygotsky's field. He talked about when the mind and the creative ability of a young person, is it 1 year old or 2, and it comes before language, like their actual ability to not only learn, but learn to be their own person and have their own thoughts, unique thoughts, very precocious. Pre-language is what Lev Vygotsky felt. Well, again, going back to the conditioned learning, that's what is the first learning, because it's conditioning the cellular responses. So recently I read something about how at 2 months in utero, the baby is adapting to what life will be like outside the womb by developing conditioned responses to what they're experiencing already inside this belly. So learning starts from the very beginning of fetal growth. Perhaps learning starts after the embryo becomes a fetus. I don't know. The thing I love about doing this work and doing the courses, the basic needs of baby courses, is that like a Montessori educator in a classroom, I don't pretend to be an expert so much as a facilitator, and I get to learn as much from other people because we all, like the children in the environment, the older children and the younger children, we exchange so much between ourselves in this basic needs of babies course. It's not a traditional course online where you go in and you read, chapter 1 and then do these exercises and take this quiz and read chapter 2. It's a prepared environment where you can go in and explore and do what you want, not do what you want. And it's like a library. There's more than you could ever hope to do in the environment because it's not intended to consume. It's intended to explore within the space. But that's a side note. Back to this learning, I guess the bottom line is just, at the beginning, at the beginning.
What does accompanying a new mother look like from a Montessori perspective?
Yeah. So this is a really important question, because answering this question is, what would a Montessori doula be? How would a Montessori doula approach the mother, the baby? And so I'll just summarize very, very briefly. We could be interviewing for a day or so with all of this. It's such a beautiful, broad topic to talk about, so important. But the most important thing with accompanying a new mother really is just like accompanying a child in a Montessori classroom. You don't want to teach them anything. In fact, you aren't teaching them anything. The environment is their teacher. And they're able to find what they need within the environment to construct themselves. So, with a new mother who's just given birth, she is so full of hormones, which these hormones change her, right? When we're hormonal, we're emotional. Think about all the limbic system, the way we react and experience life when we're delicate. After a big cry, we're so tender. So a new mom is so tender. And as accompanying her, you really want to be that secure relationship to her and to model that, so she's able to, her mirror neurons in the reality. It's really that all you need to do is be for her what she could be for her baby, and allow her to self-construct as a new mom. If you have some ideas about what that might look like, you can't give her a lesson. You have to allow her to, you have to accompany her towards her finding that herself. Because when she has the aha moment, just like that child in the environment who's self-correcting in a math work, and you see this incredible self-confidence built. So what we need for mothers to develop is self-confidence and trust that they can find their way. So they aren't looking in the books, and they aren't looking online, and they aren't looking in everyone else's videos about everyone else's baby, because what you have in front of you, your baby, and who you are as this baby's new mom, is the complete package.
And our final question, what does it mean to offer independence, respect, freedom, and dignity in the care of a new mother and her newborn?
Well, we'll start with independence, since that was the first one. Yeah, independence. I think this is really one of the most difficult to grasp ideas about a newborn, is that if the environment is prepared for them, they are able to, and this is what Grazia teaches, what she taught me. I have never had a child. Even if I had had one, it would have been before I learned all this. And just like so many moms doing Montessori trainings, we're like, oh, if only I'd known that before. But what she says they learned, so from 1947 to 1967, for 20 years, Adela Costagnochi and Grazia Honerger-Fresco were working together, because Costagnochi passed away in 1967. So they did all this research on newborns. They were able to adjust and correct environments and work with new moms and do the prenatal courses with them, so that the moms were prepared to prepare their environments. They had support of the newborn Montessori assistant, what would today be the doula, at home with them, helping them observe. Then what would happen if all these conditions were met? That newborn would actually find on his own his sleep rhythms and his eating rhythms. Now, if you want to confuse a human being, any human being, but especially a newborn, you put some kind of schedule onto their sleeping and their eating. You tell them how to sleep and when to sleep and where to sleep, and you tell them when to eat and how much to eat. And this basically turns the physiological system of a being, of a mammalian being, upside down. So what Grazia, and to do that, we have to really respect these rhythms, which means we can't have a schedule and a rhythm of our own because we're sacrificing those early months in order to allow that newborn to find his or her own rhythm. And so what they found was that the independence offered to a newborn through the prepared environment, giving them what they need so that then they can, I'm hungry now, this is how much I want to eat. Now I want to take a little nappy nap, and 10 minutes later I'm going to finish, but no, I don't want to finish now. And now I'm sleepy and I don't need a machine that vibrates. I don't need to get in a car seat. I don't need to get in a stroller because I just need the conditions in my environment where I feel safe. So not in the other room and maybe on my mom's body, because maybe we're actually doing, contact parenting, skin to skin through the early weeks, because then you're not making them adapt again, so in my Montessori course, I think it was not recommended to, but again, that's a very different wisdom set than our anthropological evolutionary basis, which is for hundreds of thousands of years, babies are on the mother or on the aunt or on somebody to sleep and feel safe. So again, if I don't feel safe, I can't fall asleep. So why am I not sleeping in this room down the hall? Because I don't feel safe. So they will find these rhythms and they will self-construct if they are given independence. And independence means respecting their particular individual, unique, one in a kind in the humanity, the history of humanity's, rhythms that can only be understood by the mother through observation. And that's what the Montessori newborn assistant would assist the mother to do in the first 10 days or 2 weeks. A daily visit, 3-hour pieces, observation and together. So they could tease it out together. They could, oh, this baby is communicating this. This is what I see. What do you see? Respect, I think that is everything we've been saying, respecting biological needs and psychological needs and spiritual needs. And, we've covered, I think, all of that. And freedom, it goes back to that independence. You have to have the freedom to become independent. So you have to be given the freedom to find your own way, or else independence isn't a result of that freedom. Obviously, freedom within limits, again, you need to be so fully present so that there is the co-regulation, which is nice that we bring in now because it's how we're going to finish. So again, freedom with limits, because no, you're not free as a newborn. The limits is you need co-regulation in order to learn to self-regulate, especially emotional states. And I think dignity is just measured through the golden rule. What would be dignified for you? If you're in a hospital bed and you can't move your own body, and the nurses come in and just start doing something to you and move you from one, they have to get you out of your bed and put you in another bed, and they don't acknowledge you, they don't look you in the eyes, and they just start picking up your body and putting you over there. And that's not dignified. You are a human being. Hello. We need to move you to a different bed. I'm going to do this now. So, wiping a child's nose, we just go in and wipe their nose. We don't say, can I wipe your nose? I see you've got some mucus. I really want to help you get cleaned up so that, you're more comfortable. I'm going to start, to help prepare them for that. For the newborn, it's not that we have to be a robot doing this rote script of, I'm going to do this to you now. I'm going to do that to you now. Are you ready for me to pick you up? It's about relating to them as a dignified human being and letting them know that you are actually collaborating with them and you are making sure they're ready for whatever's happening, whether it's through language or whether it's through eye contact, whether it's through reading their behavioral signs. That's dignity. And it's nothing different than any other human would ask of us, to not be treated like a body without a spirit and a mind and a heart.
Thank you. We have one last video to show. Do you want to show it now?
Yeah, this last video is Dan Siegel, who I don't know his work really well, but he's been working for a long time on the science of connection and relationship. So I thought it would be a nice little way to close. And then after the video, I'll just we'll conclude with a few comments.
Me and the we. Why do we remind ourselves there's a me? Because of exactly what you're asking about. Because if, as mammals, we don't have attachment figures who honor basically our safety, our being seen, and our being soothed. So we developed a fourth S of being secure. So safe means our bodies are protected and our integrity, our moral integrity is protected. Seen means the inner nature of who we are is seen beyond just our external behaviors. So we're not just managed, we are tuned to. That's seen. And soothed means because our nervous systems are immature, because we're mammals, that's just the way it goes, we need the relational connection to regulate our internal system. That paired relational connection is called a dyad. That dyadic connection then allows the growing nervous system to develop more autonomous inner regulatory capacities. So essentially, when that happens, you can live a life of harmony. When it doesn't, you're prone to chaos and rigidity. So there are lots of things that get activated. I'm just finishing. I've been working on a project for 18 years.
Perfect. Let's say a last few words. What did we not say? What do you want to add? What do you think is important to still be heard?
Well, referring to what Dan Siegel is talking about, so the very first two words that are kind of cut off at the beginning are the me and the we. Why are we talking about the we? It's what Hedy, the video that we showed at the beginning, is talking about, is that there's this relational space that exists between two people that isn't me or you. So it's not the me or the you, it's the we. And the we is what he talked about as a space of attunement. So imagine it's like an orchestra in harmony. Every musical instrument is tuned, and the music we're hearing is a harmonic experience. Grazia would talk about that is the fundamental importance about the secure relationship, is that we're in harmony with this other person, that we're attuned, that our notes are tuned. So we can't do that as an adult to a child if we're not actually entering into that space. And that's not so easy to do because many of us didn't receive that. And we don't really know how to do anything that we didn't receive. And so we have to learn that through new relationships, whether we are learning that, say we didn't receive it, we learn it through our partner in that relationship, or we don't, and then we go see Hedy and she helps us fix that. But what a gift to give that to someone from birth so that they really are attuned with their mother, their father, their family, with the world. And that attunement is what allows them to be a nonviolent person. Because I truly believe, and this was what Grazia was trying to help us understand in the Cosmic Task of Birth to Three, the presentation we did in Prague in 2017, that inner war, which is between your biology, your urges, your instincts, your needs, and the outer society that is treating you in a way that isn't in harmony with your inner, that person is in a state of chaos. He said it, Dan said it at the end, you're either attuned or you're in a chaotic state. And this chaotic state, this disattunement, I believe is really at the foundation of, what we have today in the world, which is these wars that, we've always had war and we'll always have war until we learn to attune to the newborn. So that's why I feel pretty strongly about this work with the newborn, even though in the Montessori movement, the newborn work is completely irrelevant because you're not in a Montessori school and you're not using all these amazing materials that Montessori, herself organized around, Segwin's materials. And you're not working with a mind that is the absorbent mind in 0 to 3 is the subconscious versus the absorbent mind from 3 to 6. And so it really is not as exciting. And yet every one of those 3-year-olds who's crossed the threshold into that Montessori classroom has had to go through this period of time. And so all we can hope for is that more babies find that attunement, not just with mothers, but with, life, and how amazing that would be. Thank you for giving me the space and the opportunity to say these things today. We
Thank you.
appreciate your work.
Thank you for your words. Thank you for the deep closure as well. And thank you for making the time to be here with me for this interview. And yeah, thank you for supporting our conference for third time.